Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of VAFA Tragics. It's great to be back talking VAFA football with you as you welcome Brenton Mann.
Andrew, how are you?
A lot to talk to you about today, Brenton. We'll get onto that in just a second as we welcome Martin Kelleher.
Thank you, Andrew. How are you?
Very well, and Michael Fitzgerald.
Hello Andrew, lovely to be here.
It's
lovely to be with you.
Great to be back around the desk. We're going to start this week in Division 2. Particularly, Brenton, you were there, you saw the game unfold as the news out of the Division 2 is Elsternwick and St John's. The game was called off late in the third quarter due to a major melee between the two sides. Tell us what happened.
I was out here at Elsternwick Park.
Headquarters.
At headquarters. Now we've got Aaron Thornton, a bit of a backstory. Aaron Thornton, ex-captain of Elsternwick, now playing at St John's. There was friction both sides of the fence between supporters, coaches. There were spot fires during the day, and
so a bit of niggle in the game.
There was definite niggle in the game, and it was not a matter of if but when. So it was a very unfortunate situation. I've never been a part of a game that's been called off. I know both sides are very disappointed, and we'll just have to wait to see what happens during the week, I think.
There will be a VAFA investigation to take place looking into the major melee. Both clubs have been charged with a major melee. 2 players were reported out of the melee, and those cases will be heard at the tribunal on Wednesday night. The other important thing to stress, I think, is that there's no result actually determined on this match at the moment, even though the scores on the website indicate St John's got the win. They were leading by 64 points when the game was called off. So, you know, when that comes to that investigation comes to a conclusion, I'm sure that will be taken into consideration. But at this stage, the game is a no result at this stage.
You don't play footy for stuff like that. It was very disappointing. Both sides played against each other last year. That was very competitive games. There's always a bit of niggle in football, but I think both sides went too far, and it was just an unfortunate circumstance.
Brendan, a question. There was a player count was called. Was that vexatious by whoever called the player count, or was it a genuine concern that there was?
It was a genuine concern from what I've heard.
Right.
There were reports. Oh, not reports. There were red cards during the game, and I think there was a bit of confusion around them and the time as when players were replaced.
So there were reports earlier in the game that led to the player count.
That's what I believe the player count was stemmed from. So St John's called the player count. The player count was wrong, and Elsternwick should have been awarded a free kick. They weren't. St John's had the ball inside 450. They kicked the goal, so that was unfortunate on Elsternwick's behalf. But yeah, the game had everything.
Interesting result there from that game. So we'll find out more as the week unfolds, surely, on that match in Division 2. So we'll move on to the other matches in Premier section. Marty, you witnessed a game down at the Dairy Bell. De La Salle and Old Carey, and the takeaway from that game is that De La Salle need to work on their kicking.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, look, their delivery into the forward line was pretty ordinary. Maybe it was the hard work of the Carey backs and mids. However, the turnovers, the costly errors. Whereas, in complete contrast, the ball from the Carey mids and backs going forward, going into a very open forward line, where Reid was at full forward. He kicked 4, I think, and all of a sudden, it was a contrast in that. Again, further, D-La with the wind in the third quarter, 3 goals 6. Carey, in reply in the last quarter, 7 goals 2. Game is over.
Now, is it true, Marty, that De La Salle is not the same club since the ice creamery across the road shut its doors? It's clearly having an effect.
Well, actually, no, the ice creamery is, in actual fact, received a reprieve. I'm hopeful that the players will also recognise that and see the reprieve and perform accordingly. So it's there. Dairy Bell is there to stay. However, we have not been performing accordingly.
Now, is it a structure thing, or is it skill level? Is the skill level there, or is this structure forward of the football, from what you can tell?
I think, I just think they were very much skill errors. There was a lot of turnovers. The ball was butchered. Normally the better kicks within the club, almost those designated kickers, the guys you want to have the football in the hands of, they weren't able to make the ball spin correctly. I mean, there's instances where we're kicking out for a full back and the ball just wouldn't spin correctly, or the ball drop was bad, which therefore makes the marking player or receiving player it's just too easy to defend.
Another game with some skill errors. Fitzy was down at the Aquarium. Old Zaverians and Bo Morris. Zav's got the win quite comfortably in the end, but the game was highlighted, I guess, by Bowie's inefficiency with the ball in hand, and then the ability for Zavs to rebound.
Yes, I think Bo Morris, looked as though they were in the game in the first quarter. Kicked a couple of goals into the wind, did quite well, but from then on I think their play dropped off significantly. They didn't have the best second term. They certainly didn't go into half time in a comfortable position, and then Zavs came out in the third and final terms and completely outplayed them. Applied the pressure, and Bo Morris wilted accordingly. Chopper
Hanley's been outstanding this year, as he has been for so many years in the VAFA's Premier section, but were the Bowie defenders too conscious of him in terms of the way that they were defending the backline, allowing blokes like Jake Williams and Margin to go in and kick goals?
Well, I mean, every team has its own capabilities, I suppose, and when you target players to stop, and obviously Chopper Hanley's one of those people that you do want to shut down because he can cause enormous damage. They chose to play a big fellow back in defence, and he nullified some of the Zavs attacks, but as you say, that opened up opportunities for other players, and they took full advantage.
So are clubs aware, just using that as an example of being too chopper conscious by playing a big fellow back loose to stop that ball going in there, are clubs aware, and they should be, but are they not aware of his changing role, because he is playing on ball more?
Well, he is, and he's up and down the ground more, but nonetheless, I mean, it has been a tactic of several clubs over the years to play a big fella back, and I mean, we all know the role that James Jorgensen plays for Collegians. Yes. Yeah. Takes the centre bounce and often just drops back that kick behind because he's such an excellent reader and a beautiful pair of hands.
Is it the resurgence of Zavs?
Oh well, look, it's 4 points, and after losing the way they did the previous week, I'm sure that everyone's pretty happy to get the chocolates. But by no means it does it tell us much more than the fact they won on Saturday.
Very political
answer. Well,
there.
I think that everyone would believe that that Bo Morris, particularly given the second halves they've turned in this year, in 4 games, are going to be up against it if they want to stay in the Premier Comp next year.
Well, one team that certainly is not talking about a resurgence, they're just continuing to build beautifully, is Old Trinity. I was out having a look at this game. I want to show you some vision. I reckon if you haven't identified it as an opposition club, but Jack Hunt for Old Trinity is the game breaker. We saw it in the first week against St Bernard's where he kicked those 2 beautiful goals on the run. Against Collegians, again, he's kicked a wonderful goal here. And this one against Old Scotch on the weekend. And this is late in the third quarter. Scotch had the breeze, and there was a reasonable breeze at the Daily Oval. They'd established a lead, and then Trinity kicked 4 late goals, and typified by this run and carry from Jack Hunt on centre wing. Gathers the ball, has a couple of bounces, delivers into the forward line, then gets on the end of it and kicks a goal. Are you, as an opposition club, not aware that you need to be watching these sorts of players? Is it a lack of respect, or is it just that everyone at Trinity is just playing their part and he's just being the beneficiary?
Well, that's my view. I mean, getting back to what I said earlier about the capabilities to defend, not everyone has the players, and if you want to pick up Brendan Yetzi, you certainly got to keep your eye on him. You've got to keep your eye on Harry Tinney. Now you've got to watch the Howell brothers. Now you've got to watch the Hunt brothers. Now who's next?
You can't cover them all, can you?
You can't, and if you do, you may be eating into your own advantage there with your good players, because really it takes quite a good player
play on good players.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very impressed with Old Trinity, although, Marty, you raised it last week, they're still not kicking big scores.
No, and I think that might be the only thing that they're missing, is that they probably may need just a target up forward to be the beneficiary of the recipient of all that good work that gets done up the ground. Yetzi, Tinney, Hunt, all of the on-ballers, all those back flankers who can come through.
I guess you're in opposition. You're in the game for so long against Old Trinity because they're only winning by 3 or 4 goals. Yes. And so you still get that chance. But watching the game, it almost seems like they get to the 15-minute mark of the last, they look at each other and say, right, let's go and win this now.
Well, they're very fit, aren't they? I mean, it would have to be to play on daily. That's a huge ground.
Brent, you had a look at Uniblues and St Bernard's. We're going to roll the tape on the last minute or so of vision from this game. What was your takeaway from this game where, 2 highly touted teams?
Highly touted teams, and the game delivered. It was a cracking game of football. Highlighted these final 2 minutes, we've got St Bernard's in front here by 5 points, and Cartledge just takes a towering contested mark, which we've just been talking about. Both sides just cracked in all day, and up and back, they would have been spent on the Saturday night. Blues had their chances. They probably kicked a bit inaccurately in the last, had their chances to win, and just St Bernard's were probably just that bit more efficient going forward.
We're going to roll the vision forward here, looking at this final entry inside. You've got to play to the umpire's whistle, don't you?
You certainly do.
You can play to the umpire's whistle, but sometimes at the uni, how many whistles do you play to?
Well, that's the problem.
The hockey field and
it's the hockey field over the back.
Ross Young gets a clearance here, over the top. Great chase down here by St Bernard's. Now kick off the side of the boot. Uniblues, things are marked. They all pile on top of him, holding the ball, and that's the game.
Yeah, and we see the umpire blow time off. There was a bit of a delay as Chris Peart got up there, but it seems the umpire had blown time off.
In defence of the umpires there, it was certainly, I don't really know under what circumstances, just looking at that vision, under what circumstances the Blues player would have thought that was a 15-metre
Exactly
kick.
right. You just got to, that's an instinct thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you go back and have a look at it again, he may not have thought it was that, but he was just about to run straight into a St Bernard's tackle. And I think he...
Going the decoy?
Well,
the decoy claiming at the mark?
No, but maybe he stopped. Not as much to think about the mark, but hoping the umpire would blow his whistle for a mark, but to try and step around him and have the shot for goal.
I think players naturally play for play on, so you can't quite hear it on the tape. There might have been a whistle on the opposite side of the ground. The camera not quite picking it up. The other game was Collegians at Uni Blacks, both sides without a win, but Collegians getting the 4 points to leave Blacks 0-4.
Yeah, and Blacks were good early. They kicked 6 in the first quarter. Their effort, their intensity, their tackling pressure was right up, but just finishing, they repeatedly turn the footy over at half forward. Just that structure is just falling down, and they just didn't have enough targets inside 50 as well.
Yeah, they've been really robbed of Patterson, being forced to play on the ruck by having Willingham out of the side at the moment. So it's an amazing fall from grace, really, for Blacks.
So therefore, change what you're doing. I mean, it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different outcome. If you're continually falling down at half forward, change how you do it. If you've got to carry it a bit further and get it down the ground a bit further, I mean, Zabs have changed where they've got Handley up the ground a bit more now. They've varied 10 goal kickers for Zabs on the weekend, whereas everybody was aware that when they had the twin towers up forward, they would kick 50-60% of their goals. So change what you're doing, modify how it gets done.
Now, Blacks weren't alone on the day. Collegians repeatedly, especially in the first quarter, repeatedly just turned the footy over at half forward as well, but then they've just started to find their mojo a bit. They had Tafts, Watts, Corp, Chaplin, Birch up forward.
Problem for Blacks is, where's their next win coming from? They've got Old Trinity at the Daily next week. That's not going to be an easy game, considering where the form sides are at the moment.
So I'm going to ask a question, did they run out of legs?
Yeah, they did.
So they're going out to Daily. It's not going to get any easier out there, where you do need your legs.
Good luck with that.
Worrying signs for Blacks, and particularly given that we saw what happened with St Bede's Mentone Tigers, who played in a grand final and struggled to get going last year.
Yes.
We're going to move on to have a look at which sides in the VAFA had a good day and who had a bad day. 'Cause you had a bad day. Okay, guys, who had a good day on the weekend in the VAFA?
I think Northern Blues. Northern Blues knocked off in Div 2. They knocked off Ivanhoe at Preston, and I think they're just starting to find their way in Div 3. They've had
Div 2 now.
Oh, Div 2. Sorry, they've come from Div 3 to Div 2, and before that, Div 4 to Div 3. So they're starting to find their mojo, and Paradians are in the 4. Now they might. I think Northern Blues, their best footy is better than Paradians. So if Paradians start to falter, which they have over the last couple of weeks, I think Northern Blues might be able to slip into the 4.
Dave Bounty had a pretty good day. He kicked 6 of the 12 goals for the whole match on the weekend. 6 of his side's 8.
Got a very distinctive home ground too.
Northern. No, where is it?
The Rutherford
Reserve.
Got a very distinctive home ground advantage. So ground slopes, one end to the other, the pockets drop away. It's quite a distinctive ground to play on.
Marty, you had a pretty good day on the weekend with your under-19 side.
Out at Northern Blues, ironically. Kicked a goal with 10 seconds to go to win the game, and the coach, yours truly, didn't even know what the score was, and so I was wondering why everyone was jumping up and down. I was concentrating on the
Fitzy,
players.
did you pick up anyone that had a good or a bad day?
Yeah, a bad day. I think St Mary's Salesian went down again. Started really well with 2 wins and have now dropped the last 2. So bad day for them, and I think a bad day probably for OMs. who would have expected to beat Parkdale Vultures and didn't.
They've been a very disappointing 2 weeks, haven't they, OMs?
Yeah, they have. Parkdale Vultures held scoreless in that final quarter, and OMs charged home but couldn't quite get there in the end.
Now, I'll give a good day. I reckon there was the umpires, I thought, in the games that I saw on the weekend were terrific. I thought they did a great job. And I also thought that for St Kevin's, good day. Roll out Stephen Gillan.
Yeah.
There's a big name.
They're going along beautifully, the Scobbers. They take on Old Brighton this week in what it should be one of the great games this weekend of VAFA football. I'll give a good day to Parkside. They had their first win since they've been welcomed back into the VAFA. It's time now for Fitzy Fires on 5.
Good evening, and again tonight we look at 5 aspects surrounding amateur footy. Let's go to the videotape. Number 5. Has Mick Malthouse really broken the coaching game's record? I say no. In fact, after checking records here at Cliff Bastow House, I believe he's a long way off it. Jock McHale simultaneously coached Collingwood and the Old Zaverians in 1928 and 1929, and until Malthouse can add an amateur club, say Hampton Rovers, to his CV, he's still number 2. And please, Mark Robinson, spare us the gushing over how well Mick handled the pre-game ceremony. Since when has it been that difficult to walk out onto a football ground, even when the lights are out? Number 4. In this post-Kevin Rudd selfie era, apparently it is also difficult to walk back to a hotel after a game. Last week we saw Alistair Clarkson refuse the opportunity of a photo with an enthusiastic social media reporter, instead responding like a young Sean Penn. Clarko, of course, shuns the limelight, as he told us in at least 4 media interviews the next day. He hasn't been this shy since Ian Aitken invaded his personal space in London all those years ago. Number 3. Speaking of Ian Aitken, hasn't he got his Q Bears rolling along nicely? 2 flags in a row and now unbeaten after 4 rounds. And once again, the mean streets of postcode 3101 are a happy place to be. Can the Bears return to the top tiers of amateur football as in the days of yore in the 1980s? And will this September see more medals draped around the necks of players who wear the VAFA's most unfashionable Guernsey? Maybe, maybe not, but I'm sure their coach will oblige any photographers. Number 2. Rumours abound that some clubs want alcohol allowed after 2 p.m. at VAFA games. While the reintroduction of same would ease the ever-increasing strain on club coffers, it's just not the answer. Even without the neck oil, there's already too much mindless rubbish coming out of the mouths of amateur football fans. So let's keep our grounds dry, the language clean and the invective good-natured as we look forward to sharing a 5 o'clock Foster's. And number 1, how can we go past the teas, the grasshoppers, the hedge burners, the horned frogs, whatever you want to call them? Old Trinity is 4-0 and top of the table. On Saturday, they avenged last year's round 18 debacle by taking down the Redmen. But believe me, Coach Adam Andrews is far from satisfied. The denizens of the Daily haven't made the final since 2004, when Andrew Ramsden and Andy Coltrera were playing their Batman and Robin act. But multi-medalist Brendan Yatsey, Harry Headdress Tinney, the Hunt and Howell brothers and co will take a lot more scalps yet, and will surely see September Premier action for the first time in their careers. And that's all from me.
Good on you, Fitzy. That's Fitzy Fires on 5. It's becoming a smash hit here as part of VAFA Tragics. Another hit, which we love to see every week. You better get that wine bottle there, Marty, because it's time for Marty Callagher's Wine of the Week.
Wine of the Week. Lunch season is coming up. Remember, we also have ladies' lunch coming up this week. Here we have a bubbles to celebrate what the women in amateur football do around your club, what the women in your club do for you. Think about your mums washing your dirty socks and your filthy shorts and your disgracefully muddy jumper and that sweaty jumper and your sweaty training top. Think about the women who man the canteen. Think about the women who actually act as the secretary, maybe even the team manager. Look after them, put a lunch on for them, get the McPherson bubbles. Recommended retail on this, Andrew, is $11.99. However, for member clubs, $6.65. Although I am led to believe that Blair O'Hara has a special coming out for member clubs. So please be aware of that, all club members.
$6.65, that is a bargain for a bit of sparkles for your Mother's Day lunches, which are taking place, I think, this weekend for a lot of clubs.
And they'll probably take place the next weekend for those who are away.
Now, so was there a gripe that you had with the...
Just a slight whine.
Yep.
Which sometimes can be soothed with what Michael has referred to as the neck oil. Length of quarters, Andrew. Length of quarters. Last week we saw at Old Essendon. Now there was that controversial 25-metre penalty which was paid. Now the players obviously from Old Essendon were a bit upset because Old Haileybury kicked the goal with 6 seconds to go. However, when we panned back to the vision, we saw that the game had reached the 38-minute 49-second mark of the last quarter. 38 minutes and 49 seconds. As was just told to me previously, the quarters are 20 minutes plus time on. How can time on go longer than the actual quarter itself?
Or go as long as. It's happening too frequently.
34 minutes at D-Lar and Zavs in the last quarter. 34 minutes D-Lar carried in the last quarter. Now, I'm not complaining because I love football and I love to watch footy. However...
But you are complaining.
That's what the segment
That's
is.
why I am complaining. So we'll just tear up the script, that's why I'm complaining. What is it with 38-minute last quarters? Do we need to consider something?
Oh, making it even 40, I reckon.
Done. Thank you. Till next week when there's a wine.
As a player, I'd object to 40-minute quarters.
You're playing 38 now, mate.
That's true, that's true.
Quickly, a couple of big games this weekend. Just wanted to mention Chadstone and South Mornington both gunning for their first win in a couple of years. It should be a great chance for them, both of those clubs in Division 4. Any other games you're looking forward to?
Who's your tip for there?
Oh, I reckon Chadstone maybe might get a win
Chadstone
first win in a
home?
couple of years. They're at Jordan Reserve, they're at home.
They're at home.
Good luck to both those sides and all sides this week in the VAFA. This has been the VAFA Tragics. We'll see you again next week.